My life became divided into two distinct periods, before the shadow and after. It began subtly, a dark shape lingering at the edge of my vision, vanishing the moment I turned my head. I blamed tired eyes, too much screen time, the tricky light of late afternoons. But the shadow persisted. It grew bolder, more defined. Soon, it was everywhere. A silent, human-shaped darkness that followed me from my apartment to my office, from crowded streets to the quiet of my own bedroom. This was no ordinary shadow. It cast no light, made no sound, left no physical trace. But its presence was a cold weight against my skin, a constant, unsettling reminder that I was no longer alone. I was being watched, followed, haunted by something only I could see. The true nature of the haunting revealed itself gradually. The shadow wasn't just a passive observer. It was an active participant in my life. I began to notice a terrifying pattern. It materialized, dark and distinct, the moment my pen hovered over a contract for a lucrative but soul-crushing job. It stood at the end of the aisle, a blot of darkness in a brightly lit church, as I prepared to propose to a woman I knew, in my deepest heart, was not my true partner. It appeared in the doorway of a beautiful, spacious apartment, the kind I was supposed to want, as I reached for my checkbook. Every time I stood at a crossroads, poised to make a decision that would define my life, the shadow was there. And every time, its presence filled me with such a profound, freezing dread that I would stall, hesitate, and ultimately retreat. My life became a collection of almosts and near misses. Opportunities slipped through my fingers. Relationships stagnated. I was trapped in a state of permanent paralysis, a prisoner of a phantom. The breaking point came on a day that should have been my triumph. I was about to accept a major award for work I felt no passion for, in a field I had fallen into by accident. As I walked backstage, my name echoing through the auditorium, the shadow stepped directly into my path. It was denser, more real than ever before. The old fear surged, urging me to flee. But this time, a new emotion fought its way to the surface. A blazing, desperate curiosity. Why was this happening? What was it trying to achieve? Running had gotten me nowhere. Hiding had only made me smaller. In that moment, standing in the wings of a stage that represented a life I didn't own, I made a decision. I would stop seeing the shadow as a monster to be feared. I would start seeing it as a mystery to be solved. If it was trying to tell me something, I would finally listen. I began my investigation like a detective on a surreal case. I kept a detailed journal, noting every appearance of the shadow, the context, the decision I was facing, and, most importantly, the gut feeling I had been ignoring. The pattern that emerged was not what I expected. The shadow didn't appear when I was in genuine danger. It didn't show up when I was making small, everyday choices. It only manifested when I was on the verge of betraying myself. The high-pressure job was my father's dream, not mine. The proposal was an attempt to live up to a societal timeline. The perfect apartment was in a neighborhood I disliked. The shadow wasn't sabotaging my life. It was sabotaging the false life I was building. A shocking, incredible realization dawned on me. The shadow wasn't my enemy. It was my protector. Armed with this new understanding, I deliberately put myself to the test. I scheduled a meeting to discuss a major project that aligned with my true passions but seemed risky and unconventional. As I sat at my desk, preparing my notes, I felt the familiar chill. I looked up. There it was, standing across the room, a pillar of darkness. My heart hammered, but for the first time, the fear was mixed with something else. Recognition. I stood up slowly, my legs trembling not with a desire to flee, but with the effort of moving toward it. "I see you," I whispered, my voice steady. "I know what you are now. You're the part of me that remembers who I'm supposed to be. You're my conscience. You're my truth." I took a step forward, then another. The shadow didn't retreat. It held its ground. As I came within arm's reach, I saw it wasn't a formless void, but something ancient and knowing. It slowly raised a hand. I, without a moment's hesitation, reached out and met it. There was no violent collision, but a profound merging. The darkness flowed into me, not as a cold invasion, but as a warm, integrating wave. It was a homecoming. The fear dissolved, replaced by a clarity so sharp it was almost painful. The shadow hadn't been holding me back. It had been holding me together, preserving my core self until I was strong enough to claim it. The world looked the same, but I was fundamentally new. The constant, low-grade anxiety that had been my background noise for years was gone. In its place was a quiet, unshakable confidence. I walked into that meeting and pitched my passionate, risky idea with a conviction I didn't have to fake. I started making choices big and small that felt authentic to who I was, not who I thought I should be. Life didn't suddenly become easy, but the path became clear. I was no longer fighting against my own current. We all have our shadows. Maybe yours isn't a visible specter. Maybe it's a nagging feeling in your gut when you say yes but mean no. Maybe it's a quiet voice of doubt that speaks up when you're about to conform. Maybe it's a deep, restless ache for a life that looks different from the one you're living. We are taught to fear these parts of ourselves, to ignore the ache, silence the voice, and rationalize away the feeling. We label them anxiety, fear, or self-sabotage. We fight them, and in doing so, we fight ourselves. But what if the craziest story isn't the one about the monster that haunted you? What if it's the story where you discover that the monster was a misunderstood guardian? What if the shadow following you isn't trying to lead you into darkness, but trying to shield you from a different kind of darkness, the darkness of a life lived out of alignment? Your shadow knows your truth. It remembers the person you were meant to be before the world told you who you should be. So the next time you feel that pull, that hesitation, that quiet, persistent whisper, don't run. Turn around. Face it. Ask it what it wants. The thing you've been running from all your life might be the very thing that's trying to lead you home.